fly I'm going to tie for you today is a Quill Body emerger. It's a fly that over the past few years has worked pretty good, but this summer was absolutely dynamite. So what it's designed to look like is basically an emerging mayfly, something small like a blue-wing olive. So it has a bit of a trailing shuck as well as a mayfly looking body. Right now I have a size 16 kind of scud hook or curved pupa hook here. I tie it in 16 or 18, but for the purpose of tying a little bit bigger so that you can see it. So we'll start with 70 Denier in olive. And we'll just get kind of a thread base put on here. And I go right down onto the bend of the hook and hopefully don't catch my thread like I just did there. So clear right down onto the bend of the hook, snip off the excess. And the first thing we want to tie on is essentially kind of the trailing shuck here, or a bit of the tail. So because it's right on the bend of the hook, what I typically do is I turn my hook a little bit so I can access the very, very bend of the hook. So what I'm using here is just some poly yarn in gray. You don't need very much of it because you're just making kind of a thin looking wispy kind of a tail. So maybe, a clump of strands, maybe about like that. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a little trailing bit here. I'm going to take the more evenly cut side, tie in the rough side. Okay, so we'll just put it on there. It doesn't need to be very neat because we're going to hide it shortly. And like I say, I go right down onto the bend. I use almost the entire length of the hook for this fly. Okay, so once that in, we take off any kind of straggly ones. These ones here that are kind of straggling, I'll cover up later. I'm going to turn the hook again. So we got that, and I got to put in my parachute post because this fly looks a bit like clinkhammer style kind of fly. So what I'm going to use is just kind of some more of the poly yarn, but in kind of a lighter color so that it's a little bit more visible on the water. We don't need a really big parachute post, so maybe about that much will do. It's convenient because it's what I got left. All right, so I'm gonna make it maybe about that long. Tie it in, and then I'm gonna trim it at an angle back a little bit so we get a nice taper. Just gonna kind of lock it down and then move forward of the parachute post, build that little thread dam so that it stands up. And then what I've found makes my parachute posts stand up really nice is UV clear goo here. So I just put a little tiny bit on just so it kind of gets into the fibers a little bit. And I know that some people will say this is kind of sacrilegious, but well, it's what I do. And I give it a little bit of a twist and a shot with the torch. Doesn't take very long, but man, it makes it stand up nice and straight. Makes it a lot easier, I find, to tie the hackle on when I get to that point. All right, so now we're going to move back because now we want to tie on what's kind of the case that the larval kind of nymph stage was living in. And for that, we use stretch tubing. This stuff is small, but if you're going to size 18, micro might even be necessary. This is what I've got for right now. And again, just because of the angle here, I like to turn my hook again, just so I can tie this kind of right in on the top. And kind of like so, and then I put it down pretty tight because I don't want it to poke up at all, be visible when I do my wraps of the stretch tubing. All right, so kind of clear back to the tail again, and then I move my thread upwards. Now that I've got it tied on, I can turn the hook back. I'm going move up ahead of it here and just give this a few wraps with the stretch tubing. Gives it nice segmentation. And with the olive colored thread underneath, that shows through because this stretch tubing is transparent. All right, so I think that'll be good enough right there. So I'm just gonna lock that down. Like so, and trim it off. So the purpose of this part is to, like I said, look like the shuck that the emerging mayfly is crawling out of. So in order to make it look like it's a mayfly that's crawling out of it, I need to have some tail material. And for me, I use horsetail hair, but you can use microfibbets as well. I just happen to have lots of horsetail hair. So looks kind of like that. It's got nice natural curves to it, which I find works really good for tails. So I typically make these with 3 tails. So you got that one there kind of tied in. I cut them about that long. I find the natural curve on this stuff for the other side. Trim it so it's about the same length. And then I usually put one right down the middle as well. That might be a little bit too much to one side. Go. That's pretty much right on top. Again, cut it about the same length. Now I got 3 little tails showing there. And the next part is we need a realistic looking body material. And the most realistic looking body material, I find anyway, is stripped peacock curl. So I've chemically stripped this stuff with bleach, and you can find other videos online that show you how to do that. It is a bit of a trick. I wasted quite a bit of peacock curl before I got the, not so much the formula, but the timing of it right. And you can see this one's pretty thin at the end, so we don't want to use that part. It'll just break. All right, still pretty thin here. We'll see if I get lucky with this one here. So I'm going to tie that in. I'm going to go back to where we tied in the tails. Tie in this piece of peacock, stripped peacock curl, and then move forward. Now, more of this stuff. It's indispensable to me. So what I like to do, because peacock curl is so fragile, and I like it to catch more than one fish before it's thrashed, is I put a little bit of it on the body of the fly before I wrap. Try not to drop the hackle pliers this time. Really try to avoid the point of the hook too. That is something that always messes up peacock curl. Okay, so you want to lay these strips down fairly close together so you get the effect of the segmentation. Hopefully I'm going to have enough here. Ooh, I caught the hook point there. All right, looks like I'm going to have kind of just enough here. I'm going to tempt fate and even go one wrap around the front. Okay, so there we go. We'll just tie that down. Okay, so now we've got that nice kind of segmentation look that the peacock quill gives us. And the next thing we need is our hackle. So this is again tied kind of parachute style. So you want to have hackle that's got nice stiff barbs. That might not be quite big enough, so I'm going to grab a different piece here. Okay, so this has got a little bit bigger, longer barbs on it. So we'll go with that piece. And now that we've got it ready, we're going to give it a brush cut so that it ties in a little bit better. Okay, so there we go. I start tying it in at the front. And then I move to the post after that. Whoop. So a couple wraps up. Like so. I'm going to work my way back down. And move back to the front there. Okay, so now we're going to give it a few wraps around the post. I get pretty generous with this one. And the trick, of course, with all parachute flies is not to trap too many hackle fibers when you're tying that hackle off at the bottom. And just to make sure that my thread doesn't pop off on me, I'm going to angle that upwards a little bit more. Okay, and then trim off the excess hackle. All right, so now you can see, okay, we've got the decent parachute look there. We've got the tails kind of hanging down. Now, because it's almost impossible to whip finish this fly without messing up the hackle really badly, I half hitch it. It's about the only kind of fly that I wind up using the half hitch tool for. But I find it does a nice job of finishing it off. So it slides right underneath that hackle. Like so. And then we'll trim that off. Trapped a few hackle fibers there, but we'll just trim them too. And then this gets a little shot of head cement on the bottom, just to be on the safe side. And I kind of tend to run it back down into the quill as well. Another shot with the torch. Harden up that peacock quill. And there you have it. Looks like an emerging mayfly. So this would be the mayfly part of it, and then this is the shuck that it's crawling out of. And it's actually quite visible with that parachute post and stays afloat pretty well. Thanks for watching, everybody.